Jackie Robinson, if you all don't know, prior to him breaking the MLB color barrier and going on to have this great MLB career, he was an officer in the Army. He served as I believe, second lieutenant in the Army. So that was his career prior to, you know, going to baseball. A couple months ago, every mention, every article that related to Jackie Robinson was removed from the Department of Defense's website with no explanation initially and no reasoning, just wiped away. And many publications found this out and raised their eyebrows and started publishing articles about it, like Jackie Robinson was just wiped off the DoD websites. And this had gone on, I believe, for like a day and a half, and then it was finally restored. But when I heard about that, I was like, that's interesting. What's the reasoning for that? Because there was no reason. It was just wiped away. An American hero, a veteran, someone who put their life on the line multiple times for this country as a military member and as a baseball player. Like, he probably faced more danger being a baseball player than he did serving this country. But he made the ultimate sacrifice. That's why this country holds veterans and hold military members to the high regard they hold them to, because they made the quote unquote ultimate sacrifice. They signed up to put their life on the line to protect the quote unquote freedom of America. Yet we have this man here who made the ultimate sacrifice in two different fields being erased from the Department of Defense's website. And this is something that was being ordered by number 45, not specifically just Jackie Robinson, but just specifically removing certain things from the website. The explanation was that they wanted to remove any web pages that promoted diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because we know that has been something that's been hot since this man has been in office again. Something that his administration has been pushing for so long in terms of rollback on DEI. We don't need that anymore. So that rubbed me the wrong way, because here we have this national treasure, someone who has a Presidential Medal of Honor. I think he had the Medal of Honor or Medal of Freedom. I don't know what it's called, but just we want to erase part of his legacy for the sake of we don't want anything that includes diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because Jackie Robinson's story is that. Jackie Robinson's story is DEI. He put his life on the line in two different fields to better the quality of life, not only for me and you, but just America in general. He broke the color barrier in MLB, going to games every day, people throwing things at him, people hurling racist remarks at him, putting his family's life in danger for the sake of people who come later down the line, a Ken Griffey Jr., a Barry Bonds, a Mookie Betts, whoever you want to call him. He made that sacrifice for those people so that we can enjoy the sport today. The next thing that rubbed me the wrong way was a couple months ago as well, I started to see articles of protest that was happening outside of the National African American Museum in D.C. Full stop. If you all have never been to this museum, I highly recommend it. I can't say enough about just how great this museum is. This museum, just from even before you get into the museum, like the outside of the museum, the design of the museum is probably one of the greatest. I'm just gonna say American museum because I've only been to American museums. The outside of the museum is probably one of the greatest design concept structures I've ever seen. The inside of the museum is a whole nother story. It's probably one of the most immersive experience I've ever been through. The museum in itself is 4 stories. So there's 3 main stories, and then there's a bottom, like a conclusion, and then there's a cafeteria down there too. So it's really 3 stories, but it's 4 stories because there's like a conclusion and then a cafeteria. I'm gonna get to the conclusion in a little bit. So the museum is literally a trip of the past 400 years of African Americans, from being in Africa to being brought to this continent to finding freedom from being enslaved people to getting acclimated to society, to the contributions they made to the society after, getting freedom, to the contributions we continue to make to society, and where we are today in this present day and age. And it's a journey from our arrival to today. And that's what the 3 stories include. It's like I probably experienced maybe like 80% of it, and it took me about 2 or 3 hours. I think the full thing, it may take like 4 hours, maybe 3.5 to 4 hours, but it took me about 2 or 3 hours to get through the entire thing. There's a lot of things that you take in this museum, and it's very informative, and it's a fun experience. And so after you go through like the journey of 400 years and you get to the very bottom, I'm not going to spoil it and tell you what's at the very bottom, but there is something at the very bottom that's like, we are here now, and then if you want to eat, there's a cafeteria. But honestly, one of the greatest experiences I've ever had in any museums. So I highly encourage you all to go. Back to my story. So a couple months ago, I've been seeing articles about protests that was going on outside of this museum, the National African American History Museum. And I was curious as to like, well, what's a protest in regards to? And literally I found out the protests were in regards to people fighting to keep artifacts in the museum, because artifacts were being removed from the museum. And that kind of like intrigued me, like, well, why are we removing artifacts? Because I know that usually, if you're removing an artifact, it's because you're giving it back to its rightful owner, because a lot of time, especially when people pass away, the estate will lend artifacts to museums for a specific amount of time. So let's say that like someone passes away and they may have this memorabilia. They lend it to the museum for 4 or 5 years. So after that 4 or 5 years are over, you give it back to its rightful owner. But that's not what's going on. These artifacts were literally just being removed for the sake of being removed. And so I said, I've never seen or heard of this happening. Just artifacts just being removed from the museum just for the sake of them being removed. So I looked into it, obviously, like, okay, well, why are they being removed? And I found out, and I found out that there was this executive order that was being passed by this administration, number 45 again, to rewrite history. That's literally why the artifacts are being removed, to rewrite history.